Welcome to the BEASTwriter podcast. I am your host, Ryan Sakamoto, and today we are going to be discussing and answering your questions as to my thoughts and analysis as it regards to the questions that you guys were asking me. Now, I don't know who follows me on what social media outlet, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you name it, Facebook. I like to look at all my engagements on all my social media outlets and then answer your questions. However, it's been very tough to kind of juggle everything all in one, so I thought it'd be a good time to just put everything in one place and put it on YouTube. Now, for those who are new to following me, thank you for subscribing to my YouTube channel. And if you're watching this and have yet to subscribe to my channel, please go ahead and do that. There is a subscribe button in the lower right hand corner of your screen throughout the duration of the video, so please subscribe at any point that you see fit as I go ahead and break down my analysis. Also, at the end of each video, I will post my podcast playlist. So if you're unable to go ahead and see my podcast playlist, you can go back and kind of catch up on what I'm saying in real time as it pertains to whatever topic we are discussing. Make sense? It makes sense. Okay. All right. So I decided to start a new podcast episode dedicated specifically for you Twitter fans, or followers, I like to say. I don't like calling people followers or fans. Let's just call it supporters. So my Twitter supporters. And for those who follow me, you guys know I actually do this on Friday for Fan Fridays. However, I think I'm going to start a new episode called Twitter Tuesdays. Now, I am jumping the gun because today is only Monday, but you guys get the picture. Every Tuesday moving forward, I'm going to be answering your questions as it pertains to the NFL, the NFL draft, what's going on with your favorite team, what my thoughts are in real time, as well as workout videos. I know you guys want to see what I do for my workout videos. I'm actually going to hit my workout later on after this podcast. And for those who don't know, yes, I compete in the bodybuilding industry. I am a sponsored athlete by Team Evogen on Evogen Elite by 19-time Olympia coach Hani Rambod. You can find all my products that I promote, and that's online at evogennutrition.com. I also included a website to Evogen Nutrition in the link in my channel art, so go ahead and look at that. And if you have any questions in regarding to any of the supplements that I take or that I use or that you're looking into getting or possibly getting, feel free to ask me and I'll be able to answer those questions in the best way I can. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about Twitter Tuesdays. Let's get down to business. All right, so I'll be toggling back and forth. Even though it's on Twitter, I'm going to be answering some stuff on Facebook and Instagram, so you get the picture. So bear with me. I'm going to be toggling back and forth answering your questions. Okay, so let's go ahead and start off. Let's pull up Twitter. Ooh, this is harder than it looks. Okay, Randy Goff said, Ryan, do you really think the Texans trade Watson? I kind of want the team to stick it out to see some craziness in the league. LOL. Well, my answer is no. I think Texans will try and move Deshaun Watson simply because if you look at it from a management standpoint, it's going to be a sunk cost if you keep Watson on your roster and continually fine him because he holds out or because he's disgruntled, for whatever the case may be. And at the end of the day, again, it's becoming a sunk cost. What you want to do as a new GM, Nick Caserio, you want to get as much value out of the player as possible because obviously he doesn't want to be there. And if you're with the Bill Belichick do your job mentality, why would you have a player on your roster who doesn't want to be there? If it was Bill Belichick, he'd say, okay, you don't want to be there? You're going to be gone. Now, if push comes to shove and you're asking me how it's actually going to play out, I think that's the stance that I would take, is I think that's what's going to happen. I think Deshaun Watson's ultimately going to win this leverage battle because it's a game of chicken. Who's going to flinch first? And if you're Nick Caserio, the Texans fan base will be freaking mad at you if Deshaun Watson does hold out and you're getting nothing in return. Let's say hypothetically he holds out for the next year or so. That's another year, even though he's a young quarterback, that's another year wasted for both parties involved, and then his trade value can seemingly drop because then the team can be like, well, he's been out of football for a year, so what exactly is the trade value, right? So we see it similar to the NFL draft in terms of players that opted out of the 2020 season, guys like Jamar Chase, Micah Parsons, although those guys will go really high, you can make a case that Devontae Smith will be the wide receiver 1, not the wide receiver 2, this year because he had a Heisman year. However, in 2019, it was Jamar Chase in 2019 under the guidance of Joe Burrow, playing with guys like Thaddeus Moss, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who really shined and was the best wide receiver in all of college football. Not too many people remember that, but because of the year Devontae Smith is having. But let's not forget that Jamar Chase was just as good back in 2019. All right, so putting everything into perspective, that's how I like to run my podcast and my analysis, because when you put things in perspective and see it from both parties, you can kind of formulate a non-biased take and a realistic approach, right? So that's how I see that one playing out. I think even though GM Nick Caserio went on record and was on NFL Network saying he has zero interest in trading the player being Deshaun Watson, I think Watson forces a trade to either the Carolina Panthers, New York Jets, Miami Dolphins, or my most intriguing team, the San Francisco 49ers. Now, the reason I say that is because, again, Watson holds all the leverage, in my opinion, because of the sunk costs associated to the high-priced player. And when you look at it from a management standpoint, it does you no good to start off your first year as the team's GM and you're just a sitting duck because you can't have your franchise quarterback, or not even behind center, or even your franchise quarterback who has ultimate trade value in return on your investment. Make sense? It makes sense. And I did break down those potential podcast episodes into 4 different parts as it pertains to potential trading partners. I included that in a pinned post in the description below. Also, at the end of this podcast, you will see a podcast playlist. I do this because it's going to be right here at the end of the podcast, and you can see my podcast playlist and then scroll through that to see what my thoughts are on either going to the Dolphins, whether it's going to the Carolina Panthers, San Francisco 49ers, and the New York Jets. All right, so without further ado, that's what I think is going to happen. We're just going to have to see how it plays out. But yeah, I think in the end, ultimately, Watson will be moved before or during the NFL draft. All right. This next question, let me scroll through. All right, Sox23 Shy asked, who will be the Niners quarterback next season? Keep up the great work that you do. Well, first of all, thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate it. Who's the quarterback of the 49ers going to be next year? That's a tough one, right? So I just brought up Deshaun Watson. I think he is an intriguing prospect that the 49ers could probably go after. However, is GM John Lynch willing to swing for the fences and give up a first-round draft pick and possibly even a Pro Bowl or All-Pro player in return for that franchise top 5 player? That remains to be seen. And when you get outbid by the Rams for Matthew Stafford, when you have guys like Russell Wilson up in Seattle, when you have guys like Kyler Murray playing down in Arizona, and people are tweeting it out on 49ers Twitter saying that the 49ers have the worst quarterback of the 4 quarterbacks within the division, there's a lot of undue pressure that's put on John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan to go ahead and make a move. Now, what that move is going to be, I don't know, but my gut feeling is if they're unable to trade for a Deshaun Watson, their next best bet, and I stated on Twitter earlier today, is to just take the best player at number 12. If you're really high on a guy like Zach Wilson, who is the best fit, in my opinion, for Kyle Shanahan's offense, because he adds dual threat ability and would be a upgrade in terms of a skill set position, opening up the playbook for Kyle Shanahan as opposed to a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo, then you go ahead and make that play. But under no circumstance do you want to trade your all-pro player like a Nick Bosa, like a Fred Warner, in order to get that franchise quarterback. And there's debate on that. But the reason I say that is because if you look at what the 49ers have been doing over the last better half of the last 2 years, ever since their Super Bowl run, they got rid of DeForest Buckner. They traded him away, and people who are saying they couldn't afford him, again, my very first podcast was on that very move and what they should do, and as it turns out, cashed in on that YouTube receipt. I was right. But now we see what I'm talking about today. And could lightning strike twice when it comes to Fred Warner coming off an all-pro season? Could he be shipped out because the Niners are unwilling to fork out $34 million in a front-loaded contract? Because let's remember, Fred Warner was getting underpaid $17 million over the last 2 years, even despite playing on a rookie deal. And I said that, again, on an earlier podcast, if you follow me, that I came up with that number based on what Bobby Wagner's production was, because Bobby Wagner to many was considered the standard. However, if you guys follow me on Twitter, you guys know that I tweeted out ever since the beginning of last year that Fred Warner, and by last year I mean 2019, not 2020, I said Fred Warner was the best middle linebacker in the game. And he was. And that's why he's a first team All-Pro this year and got snubbed last year. Okay, so if you look at the difference in pay scale, Bobby Wagner was getting paid $18 million a year. Fred Warner was only getting paid not even $1 million a year. That's a $17 million difference, a little over $17 million. 17 times 2 over the course of the next 2 years is $34 million, already overdue in a front-loaded deal. And you can't help but think that Fred Warner is going to want that. And Fred Warner Sr. follows me, his own dad, and he's liking all my tweets, and he's in agreement, otherwise he wouldn't be liking my tweets or retweeting stuff out. So he follows me on this podcast, and I know that there's been discussions. Richard Sherman went on record saying, I don't think I'm going to come back because they need to re-sign Fred Warner, who's due $18 million a year. Well, I said that months in advance before that even came out, that report came out. So you can put two and two together. Fred Warner is going to be due a front-loaded deal. As to whether the 49ers can fork up and pony up that big money contract because the salary cap is obviously decreased and they have other prize free agents they need to re-sign, are they going to take the quantity over quality approach? It remains to be seen. But my best bet is getting back to who the quarterback is. I think the best play is to trade up for Zach Wilson, keep your draft capital in-house, and keep your assets in-house. Trade up if you have to for a guy like Zach Wilson in the top 5 and get the quarterback of the future. Because you really don't know what you're getting outside of course, Deshaun Watson would be a franchise quarterback, so you know what you're getting in return. But with Zach Wilson, at least you're getting a potentially all-pro player at a fraction of the price of what it would take to get a Deshaun Watson. And when you look at it from a ROI standpoint, risk, your return on your investment, the risk is just not worth the reward, in my opinion, in giving up all-pro talent for a franchise quarterback who's a top 5 quarterback, because that's just too much draft capital on top of players that you're going to need in order to get that one valuable asset. All right, makes sense? I hope it makes sense. Okay, let's move on. Whew, a lot of questions. All right, David Nguyen from Twitter asks, who are some free agent tackles 49ers could target if unable to re-sign left tackle Trent Williams? Well, again, if you watched my first podcast on making sense of DeForest Buckner trade, I pointed out that they would go ahead and reach for Javon Kinlaw, which they did, and instead, with Tristan Wirfs sitting there, they should have went after Tristan Wirfs, which they didn't. And again, this is all before, this is my pre-draft analysis, so you can go back and check my YouTube receipts on that. But yeah, now look what happens, right? I'm mumbling my words because I'm just frustrated, because why didn't you take Tristan Wirfs? He was sitting there, Joe Staley retired, and then you don't take Tristan Wirfs? What makes you think you don't need an offensive line for any quarterback behind center? You need a quarterback, and you need a stable offensive line. So for any quarterback to have success, for any running back to have success, for any wide receiver to have success, you need a strong offensive line. Games are won down in the trenches. You needed to solidify the offensive line, and you didn't. Yeah, you got left tackle Trent Williams, but then by rolling in draft capital in order to obtain that player on a 1-year rental, because we don't know if he's going to return, why not get Tristan Wirfs on a rookie deal and then be done with it? I'll tell you why. Because they wanted to ease the blow of losing DeForest Buckner, because they knew that their defense was stronger than the offense with Buckner there. They thought that the drop off from the horizontal board based on the vertical board was well worth it to draft the horizontal player that was 1A and 1A, depending on the positional unit that you're comparing. Ultimately, it backfired, and what you see now is you see the 49ers spinning their wheels, and they don't know what to do at the offensive line position, specifically offensive tackle. Now, we can talk about right tackle Mike McGlinchey, but that's for a different debate. I think we all know where we stand with Mike McGlinchey. But getting back to that blind spot position, if you're not going to re-sign Trent Williams and give up draft capital in return, why did you go ahead and make that move? Because if you followed me on Twitter, you would know that I said the Super Bowl window closed faster than anything or anyone has reported, because of the fact they lost to DeForest Buckner, and that would be a huge loss to the team and a bigger loss than people wanted to admit. Not only that, when they doubled down with the loss of Emmanuel Sanders, that was huge. And yes, they got Brandon Ayuk, they got Javon Kinlaw, who potentially could be Pro Bowl players. I like Brandon Ayuk a lot. I like the player, hate the reach. Said it again. They didn't have to reach to. They didn't have to trade up to go ahead and get him. They only made that trade only after Justin Jefferson was off the board, who was my draft crush, and you guys know that. So, getting back to the specific topic that we are discussing, as it pertains to the offensive tackle position, if they're unable to re-sign Trent Williams, I don't like Alejandro Villanueva. I'm getting hit up on Alejandro Villanueva. The Pittsburgh Steelers are one of the teams that I've been religiously following and covering. You guys know I cover all 32, but the Pittsburgh Steelers specifically are one of the teams that I cover on a snap-by-snap basis. And to me, they are just not on the same level in terms of skill players when you look at a guy like Trent Williams and Alejandro Villanueva. Now, common sense would tell you that, but at the end of the day, if you're paying a guy $15 million instead of $20 million, there's only a $5 million difference. Wouldn't it be worth it to just draft an offensive tackle at number 12? Or if unable to trade down or trade up for a Zach Wilson, trade back into the late teens and early 20s, where that's where my analytics are pointing to as when the start of offensive tackles run will go, and pick up a guy like Samuel Cosmi out of offensive tackle out of Texas. Or you can pick up a guy like, for instance, let's say Christian Darrisaw from Virginia Tech, who's going to go in probably the top 10 to 15 range. And then you look at a guy like Tevin Jenkins, who might be available in the early to late teens as well as the early 20s. So anywhere in there would be a nice position to pick up an offensive tackle on a rookie deal, a 4-year contract with a 5th-year option. I think that's the safer play. And again, you can get draft capital and recoup draft capital in return for losing out on those draft picks from getting Trent Williams. Makes sense? It makes sense. All right. So that's the best play. That's what I would do if I was the San Francisco 49ers looking for an offensive tackle. If I'm John Lynch, I'm trading back into late teens, early 20s where the run on offensive tackles will be, because this is a strong offensive tackle draft class, and I would pick up a Cosmi, a Darrisaw, or even a Jenkins. Right? All right, let's move on. All right, Jerry Machado, what do you think about the quarterback position, Ryan? If they do these 3 things and run it back with a healthy Jimmy G, are they once again a contender for the NFC title? So if you watched my Twitter timeline, you will notice that I pointed out 3 things. I said that the Niners should not be focused on what other teams are doing with the addition of Matthew Stafford to the LA Rams, and what they should be focusing on is their own selves. They need to re-sign, again, Fred Warner on a front-loaded deal. They need to re-sign Trent Williams, and they need to draft the best player available at number 12 if they're unable to trade up or trade down. Now, my line of thinking is this. Are they Super Bowl contenders? My answer is simply no. And take it for what it's worth, but let me just run down my analytics on it. All right? They're not the same team as they were back in 2019. You know, when you lose team captains and team leaders like DeForest Buckner, who I just pointed out earlier, Emmanuel Sanders, who I just pointed out earlier, Quan Alexander, the founder of the Hot Boys that I'm now pointing out, and then you take into account Joe Staley retiring. That's a lot of locker room leadership that's just out the window from that 2019 team. And for you to tell me that they're the same team and that locker room dynamic is the same, you'd be kidding yourselves, because it's not. It's a younger team. You can see it. And now with the pending free agents coming up, you don't know if Kyle Juszczyk is coming back. You don't know if K'Wan Williams is coming back. You don't know if Trent Williams is coming back. And the list goes on and on and on. So while the team from 2019 had a lot of Super Bowl experience, there's going to be teams and players, there are going to be a lot of players that will be coming up for pending free agency, and a lot of these players are going to go elsewhere. And let's peel back another layer of the onion to get to the core. Forget about the players and that locker room dynamic. Let's talk about the coaching staff. When you lose a Robert Saleh who goes to the New York Jets, when you lose Big Mike LaFleur who was the passing game coordinator, now rolls into and follows Saleh to New York Jets to become the offensive coordinator. When you lose offensive line coach John Benton, when you lose guys like Aaron Whitecotton, who was the assistant defensive line coach and then joins the New York Jets, that's a lot of personnel from a coaching standpoint to replace. That's a high turnover rate, and that's what happens when you have a good coaching staff. That's just the way the NFL is. Now, I'm not saying DeMeco Ryans is not going to be able to fill Saleh's shoes, because I do believe that he has everything in place to go ahead and make that happen. However, to say that it's going to be the same, if not better, than what Robert Saleh brought to the table, you'd be kidding yourselves, because Robert Saleh is now a head coach for a reason. He's a hot candidate for the better half of the last 2 years, and now he's benefiting from it. So when you take that into account, and then let's even peel back another layer of the onion, now that I'm on rambling, not really rambling, but just my thoughts process is coming through. They also, the 49ers, lost front office help, right? They lost Martin Mayhew, who was the vice president of player personnel, who goes on to be the Washington general manager. So that's a lot of, how do I say it? That's a lot of in-house assets that are no longer with the team. So when you lose those types of assets in all three phases, it's a lot to replace for any NFL team. So yeah, I don't think they're Super Bowl contenders anymore. Even if they brought in a guy like Deshaun Watson, I think there's going to be some type of a learning curve for all personnel involved in order to hit the ground firing on all cylinders, right? So that's not to say that they won't be a Super Bowl contender in the next 2-3 years, but as of right now, I just don't see it. All right. Justin Hughes, a Carolina fan from Facebook, says, how serious is Matt Rule in targeting quarterback Deshaun Watson? I think the better question to ask is, how aggressive is GM Scott Fitterer going to be in pursuing Deshaun Watson? Scott Fitterer, if you guys haven't watched my podcast, I'll include that in the pinned post. That's one of my hottest videos right now, and continues to be a hot video because of the fact that I point out that he's going to be very aggressive in a play for Deshaun Watson. If you look at what the Seattle Seahawks do, they trade a lot of their first round draft capital and trade back or even trade out of the first round in order to get a coveted player that they see fit. Now, we've seen it over the course of the years, and you look at guys like Percy Harvin, the list goes on and on and on. If I go back and I can pull up some Google stuff, but off the top of my head, yeah, Percy Harvin was one, and they won the Super Bowl that year. So to say that was a sunk cost, you'd be doing yourself a disservice, because they did win the Super Bowl, and he was a good reason why, or part of the reason why, I should say. And then you look at players that they drafted, right? It's all for a reason. So getting back to what Scott Fitterer is going to do, I included both podcasts, the one on GM Scott Fitterer and a potential trade for Deshaun Watson to the Carolina Panthers. I included that in the pinned post below, so go ahead and watch that if you haven't already. And yeah, I'm not going to go too much in detail about it because I'll just be talking about it over and over again. But it's a very realistic possibility, because based on the Carolina Panthers draft position at 8, if you're looking for a quarterback, there might be a top 3 quarterback that will be there, depending on how the top of the draft falls out and depending on what happens to Deshaun Watson. Now, you put that 2 and 2 together, and then you look at the 49ers, who only pick 4 picks later and draft out of the top 10, so they draft number 12 overall. They're not even in play for a top 3 quarterback, because all mocks indicate, including mine, that the top 3 quarterbacks will be off the board within the first 10 picks. All right. So Carolina sits at number 8. I think if you're looking at it from a tradable asset standpoint, Carolina makes logical sense, simply because if you look at what Nick Caserio is doing, and if I'm Nick Caserio and I'm looking at my financial stat sheet and I'm saying, okay, well, damn, dude, JJ Watt, I think he wants out. What do we owe him? $17.5 million for the upcoming season? Oh, what's the dead money tied to him? Oh, 0 dead money? So we can actually trade him and save $17.5 million, which is basically what we need to get above water. Why not make that deal? Why not? Let's see if we can package Deshaun Watson and JJ Watt. Maybe we can do that, yeah. And then also, let's look at Brandon Cook's contract. Oh, what? How much Brandon Cooks is? Oh, he $12 million on the books, and if we release him, he has 0 dead money associated to that contract. So let me do the math. If we lose out and trade JJ Watt and Brandon Cooks, we could save $29.5 million off the books with no dead money associated to it, because I'm not the one that make these deals. It's Bill O'Brien. Damn, that's a deal. Let's try to do that. Let's try to package Deshaun Watson. Obviously, we have to talk to Deshaun Watson to have him waive his no trade clause, and then let's package one of these 2 players, and let's look at teams who realistically hold a good, solid draft position and the draft capital where we can actually make a play and make a move, and it's a win-win for both teams. Who do the Carolina Panthers have? Oh, that's right. They have edge Brian Burns, who's a freaking underrated player. In my opinion, top 10 edge rusher in the NFL. Brian Burns is a monster. Oh, and then looks like, if they're not willing to give Brian Burns for JJ Watt, who do else we? Oh man, they have DJ Moore. Oh, both of the oh my gosh, it's even better. Both of those players are on a rookie deal. So
Why not? We can kill two birds with one stone, trade Deshaun Watson and maybe JJ Watt or Brandon Cooks, whoever, and then maybe get a Brian Burns or DJ Moore in return and draft capital. Why not make this deal? What do you say, Scott Fitterer?
Could happen. Could happen. So when you look at it, Carolina has the tradable assets to make a deal. Now, whether that's going to happen, who knows? Who knows? But it definitely gets you thinking, and Caserio can kill two birds with one stone as long as Deshaun Watson waives his no trade clause in making that deal a reality. All right. Chris Henderson, another Panthers fan on YouTube, asks, who do the Panthers pick at number 8? Well, again, I stated in an earlier podcast based on my 2021 NFL mock drafts where I break it down into five pick segments that Patrick Surtain Jr. should be the play if they're unable to trade up for a guy like Zach Wilson or Justin Fields or whoever the quarterback they want, or if they're unable to trade down. I think if they stay pat, the best play is to pick up Patrick Surtain from Alabama because, again, he would bring to the table help where BPA also fits needs. So we all can talk about the Carolina Panthers and their secondary woes. I think it goes without question. They need secondary help, and Patrick Surtain would be a perfect fit for what the Carolinas like to do under Phil Snow's defense. Okay? All right. And I believe that's it. Yeah, that's it. So again, thank you for tuning in. I'm going to go ahead and tag all you guys in this podcast so you guys can see exactly what I had to say, so you guys get notified. I know some of you guys don't have YouTube and some of you don't even sub to my channel because you don't have YouTube, but for those who do, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Again, there is a button in the duration of all my episodes right here. You can click on that. It will forward you to my subscription channel and go ahead and subscribe on YouTube. All right. Well, that'll be it for today. I hope you liked what I had to say. If you did, again, hit the subscribe button on the lower right-hand corner of your screen as I keep all things Beast. Again, thank you for tuning in. Once again, I had a lot of fun doing this, and this will be for Twitter Tuesdays, but I got to jumpstart, like I said, on a Monday. All right? Take care, everyone. I'll be back maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. We'll see. I got to work out. BEASTwriter, out.